In this section, we're going to take a look at rigging this game character with a custom cat rig. This guy is a little more unusual than maybe a standard biped, so instead of taking a preset and forming it to this character, we're actually just going to build a custom rig ourselves, and that'll take us through the steps. Before we get started, there's a couple things I want to look at. You can see that we have the textures displayed in the viewport here, and if we go into the material editor, you'll see that I've set the material editor just the compact material editor. 3ds Max 2011 has both the compact and the Slate material editor. Seeing as we won't be doing a lot with materials in this scene and we'll be focusing on rigging, we'll just use the compact material editor. Later on we'll be looking a lot at the Slate material editor and all the different nodes that we can set up with it. In the material editor, you can see that we have show map and viewport for this material, and we also have that set to hardware shading. If you click on the flyout, you can see that we have both like standard map and with hardware shading. And you should be able to see a large difference between the two. Just the standard map display in the viewport is pretty blurry and not very detailed. And the hardware shading gives us all these nice details as well as our normal map and other things in there. So if I just turn off the diffuse map, you'll see that the normal map will come up, and we're getting some nice detail on the character here right in the viewport. You can also notice that when I did that, we got this checker pattern on the character. That means that 3ds Max is calculating the shader or compiling the shader behind the scenes as we do that. If that's the case, please remember that while this checker pattern is in the viewport, you can actually interact with your objects and 3ds Max. It doesn't mean that your 3ds Max scene is on hold. The next thing I want to look at in the scene is just the layers. We have a couple layers set up for the character, the bones, the lights in the scene, as well as some muscles that we'll be adding later. If we can, let's just hide the character, and let's select the default layer. I want to look at creating a base cat rig without our character quite yet, just so that we can know where all the pieces go. So we can close this layer manager, and we'll go over to Create Helpers and choose Cat Parent. Now if you want to create a custom cat rig, you need to have this None preset chosen instead of one of the other ones when you drag out your parent. So click and drag that out, and you'll see that pretty much only this little base comes with it. Now with that base selected, if we go to the Modify panel, you'll see that there are a couple of different things that we can do with this character. Down at the very bottom, you can see that with the platform selected, you can choose Create Pelvis. And this is the first thing that you need to do to create a custom rig. So when we click on Create Pelvis, you'll see that it creates this node in the scene. We can select that pelvis, and you'll see you'll get different options in the Modify panel. There's a couple of different places you can access cat parameters and attributes. One is in the Modify panel, one is in the Motion panel, and some other behind the scenes are down in the Hierarchy panel. Cat is set up with a series of hubs, spines, and limbs that you create your custom character with. And the first hub is the pelvis that you set up, and we can position this wherever we want in the scene. And then from there, we're either going to add a spine to it or some sort of limb. So there's an option to add a leg, add a spine, add an arm, a tail, and a couple of other options there as well. So if I just click on Add a Leg, it'll quickly add a leg, and I can move this leg into place. So very much like we were doing with our other character, we can adjust all these parameters of the leg. And then if we want, we can go back to that pelvis, and we can add in another leg. So we'll click on Add Leg, and it'll kind of mirror what was done on the other side. So this way you can create all sorts of different characters. In this case, maybe we'd want to take both of these legs and move them back, and then create another set of legs. So I'll choose Add Leg. We can put that one there in the back, and move that over here, and go back and add another leg, and it will mimic the one that we just edited. So we can do a lot of different things with this. Now that we have the general idea of how this works, let's just select all this and remove it, and let's bring back our character. I'll just bring up the layers. We want to be able to see our character, And if we're going to be setting up bones, we want to be on the bones layer, and we want to be able to see those bones, so we'll keep that up there. Now for this character, I'm just going to select him and press Alt-X so that we can see through the character. And a lot of times when I'm creating bones, I'll set it to a flat view mode, and maybe set it to edge faces so I can kind of see what's going on there. So now with our character ready, let's go and create our cat parent. So I'm going to create this here and just kind of drag it out in the middle here, kind of big enough to fit our character. And maybe we'll pop over to the left view and move that into place there, and then back to the front view so we can kind of see what's going on there. And that looks pretty good to me. We may want to just align this with the character, and for that you can use Quick Align. Might have to move it back down, but at least the center axes will be aligned there. So now we're ready to start adding different pieces to this rig. We'll go to Modify, scroll all the way to the bottom, and click on Create Pelvis. And that pelvis will be created in this view. So now you can position the pelvis inside the character the way that you want. Usually try and go and do this in orthographic views. Perspective view is good for viewing your character and moving things a lot of times, but sometimes it's best to set stuff up in orthographic views like the front. And I think that looks pretty good. We could scale this out a bit too. And once we're happy with that, we'll go over here to the Modify panel and click on Add a Leg, and we'll see our leg is added there. So now we can kind of position this here in the view. Let's move the platform over first and move it forward to kind of fit in with the leg. Now on this leg, we can have a lot of different things going on. If you select the root of the limb and you go over into the Modify panel, you'll see that we have the limb set up. We have the number of bones in the limb. We have an up vector node if we want to add that for the bend of the knee. And we have some segments to the leg as well. So for instance, this leg is just a 2-bone leg. We can make it like a chicken or horse limb and add 3. Or you can add many more than that if you're dealing with something that needs that many bones. We're going to stick with 2 for right now because even though this has kind of a hoof, it'll be good for what we're doing here. Now, because we're dealing with this IK chain at the bottom here, the foot, usually I like to set up the ankle or the foot first. So let's just freeze our character here. Click on Freeze Selected, and that'll allow us to see it a little better in the view too. And then we can select this foot. So once our platform is pretty much where we want it and aligned, let's just get that going. Select that IK platform and put it kind of in the middle of the hoof. We'll now want to rotate this ankle into place, so we could just rotate so that it's almost straight up, and we want to try and align it with where its joint is going to be, and then we're going to scale it up using local coordinates so that that fits like this, and we'll just rotate that into place so it fits in the center. Then we may need to rotate it in the front view as well so that it goes up into the center of the character's foot there. Now if we want to, we can go in and we can scale this on the other axes if we want it to be a little bit thicker so it fits inside the leg a little more. And then we can just go to our other bones and start moving them into place. So in the front view here, we'll just select this bone and move the knee in there, and then we'll go to the left view. And we can see that we need to move this back slightly. And now that's fitting pretty well inside of the leg. I think this one is a little bit thick, so we'll just scale it down on its local Z and Y axes. And then maybe the thigh could be a little bit bigger. We're actually going to add some muscles later, so I would prefer to keep the thigh a little bit thin at this point, and that's what we're going to do. Now that we have this leg pretty much where we want it, all we're going to do is create it on the other side. So let's select the pelvis and choose Add Leg. And because all the additions that we've added here, it just copies them over to the other side so that we have them exactly on the other side too. The next thing we can do is add a spine to our character. So I'm just going to go into the left view, and with the pelvis selected, I'm going to choose Add Spine. See, it will add a spine up the center of the character that we can then move into place. So I'm going to select the top of the spine here and just kind of move it towards where the shoulders or chest of this character would be. And if I want, I can rotate this as well so that it's kind of facing in the right direction for that. So maybe something like that. Then I can go in and I can adjust each one of these spine links individually so that they fit in the center of the character. These can be a little bit thicker, so we can scale them up on the local axes here. I'm also just going to pop into the front view here, and we can see these guys are a little bit too thin, so we can select them there and just scale them out a little bit so they fit the mesh a little bit better there as well. And when you're pretty happy with what you got, we can just move along to the next pieces. I'll scale up this as well, a little bit thicker for the chest joint. Now, what you'll see is when we select the root, which is this piece up here, we have all the same things that we did for the pelvis. If we select the first spine in the chain here, you can see that it will give us all of our spine parameters over here. So, things like the length, width, and height, as well as the number of bones. So, we have 5 in this spine, and I think that's fine, but we could adjust it, down to 3 or something else like that if we wanted to. So now we have the spine set up in the character, and we're going to move on to adding some arms. So let's just select this and click on Add Arm. And you can see we get a little arm that pops out, and we can move this into place. When you are positioning these arms, it's a good idea to kind of keep track of the orientation so that you don't get something that's kind of flipping in a different direction or something like that. So we want to position this here inside the hand, and we'll just go to the top view to see if we can line up that elbow a little bit better. And then we have our hand here, which we'll position. And I just want to kind of rotate that into place. So rotate that this way and over like so that it's in line with the way that we had the arm before. And we'll scale that up. So this is kind of the palm of the character or creature. And we'll just rotate it into place to fit inside there. So in the front view, we still have a little bit of adjustment to be done. I'm going to move that over. And we'll go down with this a bit. Now I think it's a good time to go in and adjust where this shoulder is. We'll get a clavicle with this arm, and we want to position our shoulder with the character. It's going to be pretty important when the character deforms that this is the pivot of that. So we can move our clavicle in, and we can scale any of these up. I think for right now, they're looking okay for what they are. And we have our basic arm set up. Next, what we're going to do is just add some fingers. So to add fingers to this character, we're just going to select that palm or hand. And maybe I'll scale it down a little bit so it fits in the palm a little better. And with that selected, you can see that we have a number of digits roll out in the Modify panel. So we can set the number of digits. Our character has 3. And it will give us 3 digits there. And we can also set the number of bones that those have. So now that we have our 3 fingers, we just have to position them. The root can be moved anywhere that we want. So we'll start with this finger here. And we'll just rotate it into place. And this is definitely one area where we're going to have to take advantage of the use of our perspective views in order to position our fingers on the character so that they fit inside, because there's a lot of tumbling that needs to be done to kind of fit them correctly. Might scale this up so it's a little bit thicker. Then we have this one, which will move up a bit. This one kind of needs to be rotated towards the end, back over this way. So we have that first finger pretty well positioned for the character. And now we'll just move on to this middle one. Just select all these guys and move them up, out slightly. Then I'm going to scale out this first one a bit. So we want to position this kind of where the knuckle is, and the same with this end one. We'll just kind of align this in the front axes here, and probably scale this one out a bit. I think we have the knuckle placed pretty well. To where it needs to be. And we'll make sure we get that one too. So that looks like a pretty good setup. And last but not least, we'll add this one. We'll just move them all up. By double clicking on the first joint, you can just select all of them. And usually what I'll try and do is just kind of the same with the arms or the legs. I'll just get the first and the last of these. See if I can position that well, and then you can kind of fiddle with the middle of them. It seems to be a fast way to edit the bones and get them into place pretty quickly. So that's looking pretty good. We need to get this up by the knuckle. And we'll position this a little more inside the character as well. So now we have that set up pretty well. And we can just create the arm for the other side. Now before we do that, I want to look at the ability to add some twist bones to any one of the arms or legs or anything like that. We'll do it for the forearm, but we could also do it for the upper arm if you wanted some flexibility around the shoulders or things like that. But a forearm is definitely an area on a character where you might want to add some twist bones. So you can see that in the modify panel, if we cruise over here, we have the option of segments on this bone. So if I just increase this to 2, you'll see we'll get 2 twist bones or 3, and they start to kind of already twist so that they orient themselves properly. Now we have a graph over here where we can adjust the tangency of that twist to give it, more at the beginning than it is at the end, or something like that, and adjust different values and how strong they are. I'm just going to leave it at the default right now, but this is a great place to get some automatic twisty bones for your character, and usually they perform pretty well. The reason why we're going to set that up now is because we're just going to mirror this over to the other side of the character. Before I do that, I think I'm going to scale up this bone a bit, just the clavicle, so that it's a little bit bigger, and maybe we'll work a little bit with our skin solution, and maybe also our upper arm bone there. And once I'm happy with that, we'll select this chest bone or upper backbone. That's the hub, and we'll say add arm. And that arm will be added to the other side. It'll all be positioned properly. We have our twist bones in there, as well as all of our fingers aligned for the character. So we have a good amount of our character already all set up here. And before we move on, let's just take a quick look. Let's just hide our character, and we can freeze that entire layer and kind of take a look at the setup that we have for our rig. And you can see we're looking pretty good. You can unhide that guy, and let's just continue on with the head of the character. When using cat, a head is usually added with just another spine here. So I'm going to go over with this hub selected, and we're going to add a spine. And this top hub will usually be the head. So we're going to move that into place. Now this might be way too many neck links, in which case, that's fine. We can just go over to the spine, and we can say, all right, well, you know what, we really only want 3 of those, or whatever it is that we want, with the different character, we may only want one, and you can kind of adjust that there if you want to. I'm probably going to go with 3 or 4 just so that we can have some, because this character actually has a pretty long neck. And position that in there. Rotate this into place and move it up a bit. And let's just adjust in the left viewport the spine of this character's neck here so we can position these just so that they fit in with the character a little bit better. And that actually looks pretty good. They're a little bit thin here in the back, so we'll scale them up just so that when we actually use the skin modifier, hopefully we'll get some better results out of the envelopes. And we really want this to be kind of positioned near the cranium of the character. So I think something like that is pretty good. Now this particular character has kind of a rigid skull-like shape, and let's just take a look at what that is there. We'll unfreeze this and let's just hide our bones. Select that character. Get out of Alt X here. So we can see we have this kind of fairly rigid bony skull, and we have kind of 2 jaws going on here, and that may be something that we want to try and set up, one that kind of goes down this way, or maybe one that just controls the entire thing, because it looks like they may or may not be autonomous of each other. But we'll set up the first one and then we'll look at the second. We'll freeze him again and bring back our bones. And we're going to select that head hub. And for this, we're not going to add a spine or something else like that. Actually, what we're going to add is just an extra bone. So you can see on really any bone itself or on one of these hubs, you have the option to add a bone. And this will add just any sort of random bone. So you can really create custom, wings and horns and facial rigs with this type of setup, which is what we're going to do now. So I'm just going to click on Add Bone. And one thing that can be tricky is you see it will get added right here. And you can position this bone wherever you want. So I'm just going to position it down here, and this is going to be the start of our jaw. We'll scale that out. And in the front, we're going to want this to be pretty big. We'll just scale that back a little bit and move it up here. And you can see that, this is actually linked to my skull. So when this moves, that will move as well. And we're going to do the same thing with this bone. And I'm going to say, this is going to control the jaw of the character, this lower jaw, but it may actually control both of them. We'll have to see exactly where we want to go with that. So with that selected, we'll click on Add Bone, and another bone will get added, which is going to be parented to that first piece. And we'll just rotate this into place, scale it out. And I think I just might scale this back in a little bit, because we have this one little piece at the end, and I think that's probably part of the entire jaw, and I don't know that it would move autonomously, but we'll add another bone for that anyhow, just in case we want some more flexibility in the rig afterwards. It's always good to add that now. So now we have that small piece which we can skin to. It's like a pretty scary mouth, so we may want to have as much articulation as we can. So now what we can see, if I just hide the character here quickly, is we have this jawbone, which is going to affect all that, and it's parented properly. So that can all be skinned for our character. We'll add another one here, bring our character back, and we want to kind of set the root back to this skull. And we'll just create a quick 1 or 2 bones for this kind of inside little jaw that we have of the character. We'll rotate that into place. Make sure we have that pivot where we want it. And we'll just scale it up to where that next piece would be. Looks like it would go down to there. Then we'll add another bone. Rotate that forward. So we have this for the character. And I'm going to select both of them and just scale them out like so. So now we have these two. Let me just hide our character. And as this moves, both of those will move, and we can have that set up there, and this one working independent of that as well, which will be good. And while you see that Cat will assign different colors to all your bones, that's all customizable. So, we can select all of this, these guys here, and we can just say, okay, well, because that's the inner bone there, we can just change the color of that. And maybe this is too close to the head, so we'll just make the head a different color so that we have something set up there, and then our jaws are pretty distinguishable from each other. And let's just bring back that mesh, unfreeze it, Alt X so we can kind of see. And that looks pretty right. So we have one more piece to kind of set up for this nostril, and we can go through and do that. So we'll do the same thing we were doing before. We'll grab this, choose Add Bone, and add just a couple bones for the snout here. Push that through there, scale it out a bit. Just add a little bit of a bend to this and scale it so that it fits properly. Maybe it gets a little bit thinner and longer there. Comes out for the snout of the creature. Okay, so now we have a good deal of the face and the jaw set up. We'll just hide this and take a look at our rig. Okay, so next what we're going to do is add a couple of facial features for this character as far as the bones go. So we're going to bring back the head. And one thing that we want to add is going to be these horns here. Now, I don't know that the horns will flex too much, but we may want the ability to adjust them as far as where they are at the root of the head and things like that, just to give the character a little bit more, well, character. So we're going to go back to selecting this skull here and choose Add Bone. And we're going to do very similar to what we did for the two jaws that we added. And just rotate that out. So probably add maybe 2 or 3 of these just so that they fit properly. And I've been scaling these, but you can always just adjust their parameters here in the Modify panel as well. They both kind of do the same thing. Position that there. And once I'm happy with that, I'll choose Add Bone again. We'll rotate this one into place. And maybe just scale it down a bit. Then we'll add one more bone. And scale that up for the horn. Now, this is actually a great feature of Cat, the ability to just copy and paste entire symmetrical bone chains over to the other side of the character. So what we're going to do is we'll select the skull again, and we're going to say Add Bone. And that's going to add this bone over here, which we'll just move over to the side. And then we're going to select the root of that new bone chain that is the horn. And we're going to say Copy Bone Settings. And we'll select this root. And we're going to say Paste Bone Settings or Mirror. And you can see not only will we get that first bone, but it creates all the other bones for us. So this is really handy for facial rigging type stuff. And we can kind of do that over with the eye. So what I'm going to do is just unfreeze our character and get out of Alt X so that we can see what's going on here. I'll also hop into here and make sure that we have some pretty good settings and get out of Edge Faces mode. Go back into Smooth Highlight so that we can really see the detail of the mesh. And now we're just going to kind of circle around the character to see where we'd want to add maybe a bone for the eyebrow here on both sides. So this is still going to want to be attached to the hub or the skull of the character. And in that case, I'm going to go and just we'll Alt-X this guy again. And we'll add our new bone. And that's going to show up right there. We'll just freeze this to keep it out of our way. And then we're going to position it over on the eye. So we're really going to want to scale this down quite a bit. So it's a pretty small detail. And then we're going to unfreeze this guy. Get him out of Alt-X so that we can really position this well. Kind of on the surface of the character. Move that into place there. Just kind of move it up and rotate it. So this might be the brow of the character. We'll just align that like so. And I usually like to move these out a bit because once I am animating, you're going to want to have access to this pretty easily and readily. So we'll kind of move that there. And this will be kind of that portion. And just to give us a little more control, I think we'll actually make this a 2-bone chain. So I might move this over here. And we'll rotate this to be kind of the back portion of this eye. We'll add another bone. And we'll rotate that down so that can be the front. So if we needed to get a little grimace or growl out of the character, we could easily do that in this meaty part. And then we have these two set up here. So now with those set up, we'll just hide this guy. Go here, and we'll say add bone. See, that bone will pop up over here, and we'll do the same thing that we did with the horns. So we'll grab this guy, we'll copy it, we'll go over here, and we'll say paste mirrored, and that's going to make our nice kind of eyebrow bones for the character. Now I'll probably take both of these guys and just double click to select them all, and just change their color so that they're easy to recognize for my eye controls or eyebrow controls. And then we can have that guy set up, and we can go in and we can add a little bit more detail under the eye as well. And that's all linked and controlled and moving to the skull of the character. And then we can go in and animate any one of these very simply as well, and animate that very easily too. So now that we have this guy pretty well set up, I think we'll go ahead and skin the character. So we're going to select the character, and we'll add a skin to it, just so we can kind of see what's going on here. And then we're going to choose add to add all of our bones. So this is actually a good setup here when this comes up. You want to make sure that the helpers are not necessarily displayed, because the platform and the IK helpers are not something that you want. And you can always just type in cat and select all those cat bones, and they'll pop in there. And now what we're going to do is just add an automatic skin pose with cat. So we can select just the platform here, and we'll go over to the motion panel. And here we're going to add in our cat motion so that we can just see the character walking, and it really helps to define what you want to do with envelopes. So under this ABS layer, I'm just going to go and click this running man or cat motion layer, and then we can automatically just press play. And what we should get is the character going through a quick walk cycle. So we can see how the character is walking and what's deforming and what we want to add and adjust for the skinning. So I can see here that maybe we want to go into skin and just adjust how some of these envelopes affect our character. Can move this out a bit. That should probably affect the leg a little bit more, like so. And we can do that on the other side as well. Or we'll just actually copy and paste this. So we'll copy that, and we will paste that over. So on the other side, that performs a little bit better. And I'm not going to get too much into skinning here, really just the rigging aspect and how you can set up your cat character, but I think that's a pretty good setup for a custom character and using cat to add bones, add facial bones, and additional bones to the basic arms and legs there of cat. So the next thing that we're going to look at is adding some muscles to this character using cat muscle.